Yo, it's me, Anthony. We're gonna be starting soon, but we're still letting people kind of filter in. So give us some time, and then I'll be going live soon. sit on it.
Yeah. Get front row seats.
Yeah, please, make it look.
You don't want us to sit in the back? And
No,
have
please. My students at school.
We can all like gather around you, that way you can look like you have lots of people.
Everybody move up.
You're just giving away the sit on the screen.
Are we live streaming?
Yeah.
No.
We're live. We live.
You gotta say it like Bruce
Hold on,
Buffer.
don't be mad if I don't flex.
You got Bruce Buffer up. We are live.
I'll just sit up here.
So, my wife will be upset with me. Make the circle.
Make the circle. Make the circle.
Oh, no, you.
Make the circle.
There you go.
There, I made the circle.
All right, so I thought that was going to do this for a bigger group, so I don't need all these things. So where's that? Start with the first page. Hi.
Hi!
I'm Anthony.
Hi, Anthony!
Hi, Internet Land. We can actually move that closer. Rafe will be so mad.
Ready to set that up?
Yep.
We have to steal his computer. He said, make sure you steal his computer.
So you get the insurance for a new one?
Yes, apparently. He's using an IBM ThinkPad, for God's sakes. All right, so I know you two. Who are you? Jenn of the Jenn?
I am Jenn of the Jenn.
Of the Jen. I am. Hi.
Of the clan Jenn.
Trevor.
Remember, not of the clan Jenn, but next to the clan Jenn. And in between Christy.
Christy, apparently.
I'm Jamie.
Jamie.
Tannis. Tannis.
Hannah, the T.
Yep.
Hannah, Jamie, Christy. Other CHP hoodlums. All right, so I'm supposed to talk about nutrition for female athletes. I'm just going to talk about it in general. Some, with a few minor things that occur for female athletes, but it's not really different for the most part. Background. Why am I talking to you guys? I went to do my undergraduate in biology and art at Duke University, then got my PhD at Ohio State in actually evolutionary biology. Got recruited to CHP by Alex Viana because I was friends with him at Duke. He knew me. I've been with us, the company, since 2014. Head of the nutrition department. I've probably worked with over 300 athletes. That includes nutrition and training, but over 300 of them. So this is stuff I know, this stuff I learned, stuff I've seen with clients, how I've dealt with it with clients. Jenn.
That's me.
Jenn of the Jenn.
Of the Jenn.
Of the Jen.
Jenn of the Jenn.
Clan Jen.
Of the
Hi,
clan
Jenn.
Jen.
Is someone I work with in nutrition. She luckily deals with all the rules I give her.
I do, for the most
Well,
part.
Yeah. It's worked out well.
He's like, oh, here, eat 1,300 calories. Okay.
Don't about how low the numbers are. One of the things I want to talk about is don't go too low. He was like saying, I was like,
Talking
you
about
It's not every day, though.
I got it. So I do want to give a big thanks to Gorilla Bench, the Jenn, for having us out, for having me out. Well, what are sponsors I do thank?
Roman and Roman.
Roman,
Big one for the powerlifting watch.
Powerlifting Watch,
NFE.
NFE, I'm seeing that, I'm reading it.
The Savage.
Well, look to the right on your
Savage the watch.
screens,
Yeah.
and you'll see all the sponsors that I should be thanking.
Bodybuilding.com.
Yeah, so all those people I just thanked. Thank you. There you go.
That's going really fast.
Yeah, it really is.
We'll need to turn that down.
All right.
Rafe got excited.
Yeah.
All right, so nutrition approach and thoughts. We're skipping the rest of my intro. All right. So first things with nutrition, I would say, is always goal setting. This seems super obvious.
Always do this as much as you can.
Flex on Friday.
Always.
Flex on Friday.
We're doing live stream later.
No,
after this.
it works for me. I'll flex. Hang on. Got it.
I got bad habits when I sit down. So goals, and this is thinking both long and short term. And be honest with yourself. So this seems really stupid and it seems obvious. But I feel like it's something I struggle with still. I think most athletes struggle with it because it's easy to get blinded by what you want to do and what time frame that should actually occur in, and what's the best way to get there. So sometimes the best way to get to your long-term goal is not necessarily to head in that direction right away. So if your goal is to add muscle, the first thing you might want to do is actually get leaner, or vice versa. So understanding that having long-term goals, sort of, all right, what am I looking to do a year from now? What am I looking to do? If you're looking to train for what do you guys compete in?
Powerlifting.
You go powerlifters?
Yeah.
Nothing.
No, that's
Oh,
not.
she's powerlifting. This ain't her first rodeo.
So if it's powerlifting, since most of the powerlifters here, okay, like I want to pull, what do you want to do this next week that you're doing in 3 months, and then what's your goal a year from now? And sort of being realistic, right? If you've been training for 10 years and your bench press is, use me, I've been training for 20 years, my bench is like 275. It's terrible. But I don't train for powerlifting. But if I wanted to bench, if my goal is 400 pounds a year, that's probably unrealistic. So you want to be, in my opinion, I think it's not. There's a fine line between self-sabotage and being realistic. I think, err on the goal of optimistic, but keep it within the realm of realism. I think is good. And understand that what your long-term goal is and what your short-term goal or plan may be might be in opposition to one another, at least initially. So understanding what you are doing now might seem counterintuitive or might seem to go against what your long-term plan may be. So I think getting those down first is the most important thing to do. Right? What am I doing, and then why am I doing this? Right. So this is true of any sports. The psychology is beyond my, what I'm training, what I'd be able to talk about. But I think just having some understanding of why you're doing it, why you're truly trying to do something. It could be just for the love of sport. It could be because you're trying to prove your 5th grade bully wrong. Like if that's the case, be honest with yourself. That's it. Maybe it's part of your career. I would say for Jen and Trevor, it's in some ways part of your career. Like you're expected to kind of compete at this point. I put up good numbers.
And not be fat.
And not be fat, apparently. For me, like my physique, I have to, in some ways it is, as much as it's not necessarily indicative of my knowledge as a coach, it is, in the Instagram age, you can't act like it doesn't play a role. Right, so I can't let myself get like 200 the fat Anthony photos that posted again.
Wow. Yeah.
Bulking Anthony.
Bulky Anthony was
Bulking
serious.
Anthony on the hand because he's chasing a scale number.
Yeah, so don't, this I'll mention this later, but do not chase scale numbers. That is dumb. Very dumb idea in the off season. So yes, understand why you're doing it, what you're doing it, and sort of what you need to do. All right. So what do I like to do? Think about for long term and short terms. So for general clients, this doesn't necessarily apply to anyone in this room, but might apply to someone on the live stream, so I'll mention it. Most people that come to me are interested in losing weight. It's rare that I get the cases of, hey, I'm looking to gain weight for powerlifting. I actually worked with one guy this month that did.
Jake.
Yeah, and my response was eat more food. It worked well. You gained weight.
That's amazing.
It was a really easy client to work with.
I want that.
Well, when you got a 15-pound buffer, it's pretty easy. But generally, so I think when people focus on losing weight, I actually don't like that approach, or that terminology. I guess. Approach is fine, terminology I disagree with. Mainly because it's focused on scale, and I just mentioned, chasing scale numbers can get really, really tricky, in my opinion. One is because you never have as much muscle as you think you do. This is always true for everyone. Phil Heath, Mr. Olympia, 6 times running, does not have as much muscle probably as he thinks he does, although he's probably pretty close. But everyone else, you're not Phil Heath, so you're probably nowhere near. And so chasing scale is when people are trying to come down. I'd much rather they focus on body composition. That's really what they want anyway. like most people, if I said, okay, you can weigh 150 pounds and look like this, you know, imagine your perfect body. Or you can weigh 130 pounds and look like, imagine something that's much less muscular and more skeletal. Most people pick the 150 pounds. They just want to look good and feel healthy and be healthy. So that's mainly what people do. Right? The scale number, as much as we tend to, it gets vilified for whatever reason in society. It really, to some extent, doesn't matter. We were just kind of talking about this outside with Trevor and Jen. Yes, you're above a certain weight. Yes, even if you're mostly muscle, you're incurring some cost because your blood has to pump that. Your heart has to pump that blood through that extra mass. So there is a cost to be incurred there. If you're an unenhanced athlete, you're probably never going to reach that state if you're fairly elite. It's just, you're not going to. So body composition is the thing to sort of focus on. If your people are trying to gain muscle, the reason I don't like chasing scale weights for the sort of reason I alluded to earlier with myself is that you end up chasing a number that's probably at a detriment to health. So using myself as an example, at the time right now I'm 184, just so you have an idea of what I look like at 184. At the time I was 40 pounds heavier, I was 225 pounds, did not have as much muscle as I do on my friend now, and I think you guys would agree with that. So I was less muscular, but I was 40 pounds heavier. That was because I was chasing 225. I wanted to get to 225, and then once I got to 225, I was actually thinking about trying to get to 240. And that 225 was not a good look at all. I do not recommend this for me. So if I would have just focused more on performance and staying at more healthy body composition, I could have avoided all that. But instead, I got way too heavy. I was super strong, but I was way too heavy. So going up, that's the problem I see is people end up going to weights they shouldn't go to in terms of health. This tends to be more of a problem for men. Just the way it is, I see it more often with men that this occurs. They have a number on the scale they want to see, and they, when you take into account how much muscle mass they have and how much they can reasonably put on in a certain amount of time, it's really the number they have is way too high for the time period they're thinking of. For coming down in weight, it's kind of the opposite problem. In this case, picking a number, so let's say I'm 184 now, and I want to get to 165. God knows.
Yeah.
Well, let's say I pick that number. So I can change a lot. Like, for as lean as I am now, like, competition weight for me is probably it's about 176-ish for physique, 175. Probably 174 probably it should be. The problem is people change and may change a lot. And again, not to make sort of comparisons between the sexes, but I tend to see women change more, and this is probably more just a function of the percentages, since women tend to weigh less. So the smaller weight is a greater percentage of the weight, obviously. But women tend to change more in terms of body composition in a smaller range of weights than men do. So a 5-pound weight change on a woman will look tremendously more different than a 5-pound weight change on most men. Again, I'm generalizing. It's client specific, of course. So take that with a grain of salt for people in internet land. But that's what I tend to see. I think a perfect example of this for any CHP people that might be watching is Gabby. So one client I work with, she's a strong woman, powerlifting competitor. And she, I started working with her a year ago, actually, exactly a year ago. She was, about she probably doesn't mind me saying this, she was about 150. Lowest we got was 138 for competition, but she basically was walking around at 141. We did like a 3-pound water cut. But she looks tremendously different in that 8 or 9 pound difference. She looks about 20 pounds different. So we haven't really, now she's 150, 149, 150, she's hanging around at. And she looks tremendously different than she was last year at the same weight. See the same thing with Jenn. Your 123 from last year, basically that was the highest I think we got you like on our first kind of cycle together. And now we're walking around at 120.
About the same.
Yeah, you walk around.
Maybe a pound.
Pound
less,
heavier, I think.
Whatever, yeah.
Plus
or minus.
Yeah. I think you're a pound heavier now, walking around. So, but 124, but you're way bigger.
By me.
You could flex after
Just
that.
not here.
Yeah. We're not
Just not here.
You know, so body composition can tend to change, especially for women in sort of very narrow range. And so what happens is if someone is focused, it can be a man or woman, is fixated on getting to a certain lower weight, and they don't get there, they can get depressed and sort of feel like they failed in getting to 165, the example I gave earlier. But if you look fantastic at 170 and are performing really well, since everyone here is worried about performance, you're performing really well and you're in your weight class, like that's a win, right? So focus on performance, focus on body composition. Yes, the scale can be an indicator of if things are moving in one direction or not, but it's certainly not the be all and all of that. Questions on any of that? No. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So understanding potential complicating factors. So obviously, in terms of complicating factors, there's many. The main one I wanted to talk about here was because this is for the Women's Empowerment Weekend, was specific to, well, it was originally thought to be more specific to women. That's now been broadened to include males. But was, of course, red S phenomenon, which you guys have probably all heard about. Not explain it. So this is relative energy deficiency in sports. It was formerly known as LEA, the low energy availability, sort of part of the female triad. IOC decided that, well, men can suffer from this too, so they renamed it red S, because it's not sexist. And so really, this it can affect men, and certainly it does affect men. It tends to affect women in much higher numbers. We know it affects women more specifically in physique sports and endurance sports. Strength sports we're not sure on. We're sure it does. In fact, I know it does, just from working with clients. But we just don't, there haven't been studies on strength sport athletes. Those studies have been done on endurance and physique athletes. And so basically what happens is that, I'm going to talk specifically for females, but it happens in males too. Is that in females, you tend to, the body will divert energy to the sport activity first in some way. So yes, it'll keep you alive, and then it'll divert energy to your activity first. It will take energy away from other necessary processes like bone maintenance, your menstrual cycle, and just general growth and support of your tissue. So how many of you have heard of women losing their menstrual cycle going into a competition? Everyone. This is not healthy. Okay? This is basically a symptom, this is an indicator of red S is occurring. Is that the energy is not, that's being taken in is not sufficient to support both the training endeavors and the sort of normal biological functions of growth, development, normal monthly cycles. So the body's pulling from somewhere, it's not pulling from your training, it's pulling from these other processes. So what does that mean? It means you have to be very careful about dieting and coming in for a physique show, powerlifting meet, whatever you're trying to get ready for. You have to be careful. And I think Trevor and I were just talking about this outside. There's a fine line between what the top athletes in the world do and what they're willing to sacrifice to be the top athletes in the world, and what someone that's doing their first meet, whether it's powerlifting or CrossFit or physique, should be willing to give up. So generally, I think indicators. So when you see indicators of bone loss or extreme training fatigue, paused or just irregular menstrual cycles, it's probably the time to reevaluate your dieting process and sort of add more calories back. How someone looks is not necessarily indicative of when this will occur. Right? So I've seen clients that are extremely lean have their menstrual cycle just fine. They've been dieting, and I ask them, I go, how's your menstrual cycle? They're like, it's fine. I've seen other clients who are much higher body fat percentage, whose menstrual cycle will shut down. So looking at just sort of body composition isn't necessarily an indicator, right? We typically say, oh, like women with low body fat just have this. No, right? Yes, it tends to be more common because women that have low body fat are getting ready for a physique show or something like that and really pulling hard. So it's probably seems to be more common and associated with that, but there are certainly women that are at higher body fat percentages that we see this happen with. So what to do? Increase calories. Right? Probably 500 calories a day. It's probably a good starting point for there. And then probably you can bump that even more if symptoms persist or things don't change. Menstrual cycle doesn't start that. Client I mentioned earlier, we kind of had to do this to get her back regular. So easy to fix. It is. So for beginner athletes, I would say this should not be a problem you ever want to encounter. If you start to see this happen, reevaluate. Especially if you're doing a local meet or a local bodybuilding show, there's no need for this to occur. You're risking long-term serious health implications. If you are at the top of your sport, this might be the price that you have to pay. So if you're a top-level physique competitor, right, you probably just need to be almost superhuman lean to compete at that level, which means you have to pull your calories really, really low to get there. And so that will it's not going to work well, right? You hear these people dieting on 800 calories a day. That's not good. No one wants to do that. It's not going to be enough energy, right? Especially if you're doing 2 hours of cardio and weight training, that's not nearly enough energy. For athletes that have to make a weight class, this can be especially tricky for high-level athletes, right? Because now you have this complicated factor of, okay, it needs to be a certain weight. And it's not a look I'm going for, but it's a certain weight, right? And so Jen, what do we cut to from when you're walking around the week before a show? What are you walking around?
A good 6 pounds of above.
Right, so Jen competes at 113. So we're walking around 119 the week of the show. So that's what we're walking around before the U.S. Open was 119.
Yeah, it's like 119.
119, and then the carb water started depleting.
Yeah, and so the rest of the carb water started with depletion, right? But that's pretty much, if you've seen pictures that Jen took around the time of the U.S. Open, Jen was super lean, right? We had to pull her pretty low. She's complaining about her abs.
For lack thereof.
We have arms now.
I have arms.
No one's going to come up to you and ask about abs when arms are hanging out. I
That's
know
my
this from
TikToks.
personal experience. Distract them with your arms.
Right?
Look how much I can deduct. It's a stack on the machine. I digress. Right, so at that level, at the very top 2 or 3 in the world, 1 in Jen's case, right, when you compete at that level, right, everyone's walking around and basically training at 123, 124, compete at 113, and they're already lean, right? I look at Jen now. Same person will look at Jen now and be like, damn, that's one lean woman, right? So to get her low, we have to pull her very low to get her down to a weight where she can then cut the water to make the 113 weight, right? And this is true at sort of all levels of powerlifting at the higher level. So no one competing at 123 walks around at 123 all year. It is top of the world. So how do you structure a diet around that problem, right? Let's say you are top in the world. Let's say you are willing to pay this, red S cost. Again, it's not something you should really want to do, but if it's, I can tell you what your goals are. If that's something you're willing to do and risk those long-term effects, my advice would be really limit your competitions per year because it is going to be a toll. Right? So I think I'm going to use Jen as an example. So I don't think she cares. For Jen, we found we can't compete more than like once every 4 months. Because we could pull her down. We make make weight. Jen sets some new world record or multiple world records. We cheer, I cheer, Trevor cheers. And then I go, Jen, let's get you back to healthy. Let's try and get you back to some semblance of homeostasis. Right? So I want to get her back to healthy as soon as possible. So we'll do that, basically, take all that stress off her system, not only from the meet itself. The meet itself is going to be a hugely stressful event on her system. Right? Because not only has she stressed herself going into the meet with the diet and the training, then she had a water cut, more stress. Right? Yeah, the day before she's going to eat a lot because she weighs in a day 24 hours early. But still there's stress. The day of the meet, then she's lifting weights that no one her size has ever lifted before. And that's not an exaggeration. That is absolutely true. So that's going to be a lot of strain on the system. Excuse my French. But it's going to affect your system. And that effect's going to linger. So, basically with Jen, we'll take a couple weeks to really just try and get her back to normal, have her eating a good amount of food, get everything that should be rolling again. Get her training back on track, because usually training kind of takes a dip right after your meets. Trevor handles the training, so he's good with doing that for Jen. And so then the goal is, okay, and on top of that, sort of the mental revitalization of like, okay, I just had this big event, I just went through all this training. There's that kind of like come down, I feel you need to recharge. Especially with the diet. Like if you've been dieting we usually do about 12 weeks for get her ready. But if you're dieting for that long, it's hard to sort of have that mental stress all the time. Like, okay, what am I eating for this meal? What am I eating for this meal? And yes, it becomes habit after a while, but there's still a mental stress there. Especially if you have to make weight on a certain day. So for her, it's every 4 months. That's probably what I would recommend for other people that have to do sort of a large water diet and then water cut. Not even a large diet, but just a diet and then a water cut. If you're in that boat, I would really, not compete too often. Now, if you're more of a novice and you're not doing any of this, then I would not recommend water cutting. I would not recommend, pushing yourself to the point with a diet where you're not menstruating and you're getting these other effects I mentioned. In those cases, you can probably compete a little more frequently. Especially if you're brand new, you might want to just get time on the platform, just to get the feel of what it's like to be up there and sort of dealing with nerves. Yeah, that in that case, compete more often. You're not cutting water, you're not cutting weight. Focus on building your strength, building your technique. So you should do that. So because there was also a CrossFit here for this weekend, I did want to mention CrossFit because it is a slightly different approach to how I would do it. So if anyone is CrossFit watching, this will be aimed at you guys. So for CrossFit, the nature of CrossFit is a little different. That for powerlifting, you have this one-day event where you have to make a weight either the day of or the day before, compete, and then that's it. Like you did your meets, and then maybe you do another meet 3 or 4 months time. But you're not obligated to do that meet. In CrossFit, there's basically what amounts to a season if you're good enough. Right? So you have the Open in February?
February through March.
Yeah, February through March, those 5 weeks. Then if you obviously get through the Open, then you have, I always get them, is it regionals? Regionals and then the games?
Games is August.
Games is like July.
July, August, yeah.
So you basically have what amounts to a season, right? And the sort of fatigue, the events themselves change, right? So in the Open, obviously, it's one workout a week. Most of the workouts looks like they take like a half an hour to an hour about. So you're only having one sort of event a week, and that's, you film it, get the Open. Regionals, it's like 2 or 3 days, I think, of competition that you have to do. So now you went from a 1-day event a week to a 2-day event per week. The games, it's all week long. Right? So how do you structure this, right? Most people that come to us and looking to work with us are higher level competitors, and the goal is to get to the games, of course. That's always the goal. So how do you approach it? So the way I do it is treat your off season to get your body pretty much where you want it to be in terms of body composition. That's really in my opinion, off season is where you should be making a major body composition change. because then what you really want to do during this quote-unquote season, whether it's CrossFit or if you do triathlons or something like that where you're sort of competing over a season, you want to get your body to about where you want it to be. And then that way you can really, because that's what you'll be pushing the training the most is probably during that season and just before the season. Probably most likely peaking for a certain meet or event. Right? So for the games, you would ideally want to be peaking for the games themselves. So in that case, like the month before the games, let's say you made it all the way through open and regionals and you got to the games, that month before the games is going to be when your training is going to be peak, at its highest. Right? That's when you want to be getting in the most calories. You don't want to be sitting there going, oh, I'm too heavy. Right? I need to diet down. Right? That's not, no. At that point, just focus on your performance and really fueling those workouts. Right? Getting through those workouts, recovering from those workouts so you can push your next workout. That's what's really going to help you the most. When the games end, take some time off. Then focus, okay, so, September to December, right over those holidays when you want to eat all that good food, don't eat all that good food. Get to the body composition you really want to get to. At least close, right? So I would say within maybe like 3% of the body, body weight's about, so if I felt like I competed my optimal at like 182 pounds. So I know that's about right where I am, optimal performance for me, right? Maybe I go into the open, in February, maybe I'm weighing 187, 188, maybe 190 if I was a little heavy, right? Go through the games, push the training a little bit more, maybe still work on a bit of hypertrophy still in that time period, right? Up until regionals. Regionals, maybe go to slight, lower deficit to get down, pull down to like the lower 183, or so, 184. Finish, get through regionals. Yeah, then basically, if I'm at the very, very basically maintenance, but maybe just under maintenance, I'll hit 182 for the games. That's where I want to be. Right? So I kept my weight just over where I would ideally like to be to support, just because you'll probably recover better, that little bit of extra weight. You'll be more resistant to injury in that time period. And then you can sort of lean out right before. That'll probably happen naturally with the training increase. You probably don't really need to do much of a diet. That way it'll probably come off just naturally. So that's the way I would treat sport. Is sort of figure out what you're trying to peak for. What's your big race? So if you're a triathlete, you can get to world championships for triathlon, and you're doing Kona or some Ironman you want to do, right? And that's your event for the year. Plan on peaking for that, or plan on having your weight for that, where you want it to be about 4 weeks out, right? And then that way you can just hold weight for that final 4 weeks, push the training, or depending on what the event is, you might want to shift that time period back a little bit. Just because with an Ironman, you'd probably be peaking, your highest training session would be like a month out, 3 weeks out. The last 2 weeks would be a taper. But, it's really just pushing the training and make sure you're recovering from the training, and then going in fully fueled, ready to go, and you're already at the weight you need to be at. Any questions on that? Straightforward. But if you haven't thought about it, you can mark it. All right. Yeah, talk about that. Okay. All right, how to do a plan. I'm going to skip this. Right? So I would say, rather than doing a plan, I'm just going to talk about habits. The biggest thing for gaining or losing weight is just calories in, calories out. That is like 90% of the battle. Yes, nutrients matter. Yes, macros matter. They just matter to a much lesser degree. If your goal is just shifting where you're at in the scale, where you're at with body composition generally. Right? As you get leaner, it matters a bit more. As you get into deeper of a cut, it matters a little bit more what the macros are. But generally, I think you guys would all agree with this, mostly macros in, macros out. The protein, generally keep it higher. I like the general recommendation of 1 gram per pound. It's pretty safe. That's if you're fairly lean. And you have the calories to spare. That's sort of my go-to. I tend to lean on the heavier side, especially if you're leaner. So Trevor weighs,
On average, my walk around between 206 to 208.
yeah, so he's like 205 to 210 pounds.
That's exactly where you
So if I was doing Trevor's diet, the first thing I would think of, okay, I'm probably going to put him on at least 210 grams of protein a day. I'd probably go a little high with that, just looking at knowing how lean he is. So I know his lean body mass is pretty close to that, pretty close to that 200-pound level. So 220, 225 grams probably be what I would go with. Trevor, how much do you eat today? About?
Protein-wise,
Yeah.
it's set right around 210 grams a day. Yeah.
So it's
It
right about-
varies. I mean, most days I'm pretty right around 210, but it varies between 210 and 220.
Yeah, so it's pretty standard, and obviously Trevor's not lacking for muscle, so that's, I mean, he will disagree with me. But yeah, so that's, women, because they tend to have slightly more body fat on average, just the way things are, you probably go a little lower. I still tend to go for that 1 gram per pound. It just tends to work lower. Yeah, easy math. I had it written down on my sheet is KISS. Keep it simple, stupid, right? Like the basics are really not that hard, and I think people tend to. You can get really far with keeping it really simple. Like really far with keeping it very simple.
90% of the weight, just keeping it simple.
What?
That you can get 90% of the weight,
Yeah.
just keeping it simple.
Yeah.
Dialing in that last week or 2 weeks before meet, that's where it gets complicated. But you can literally get 90% of your goal just by keeping it simple. And it makes your lifestyle much easier and less stressful to do so.
Exactly. And so,
80-20.
Yep.
yeah, and even then, like I would argue, you could even get to like probably closer to 95 or 98%, not 90, really 95%, from doing that same stuff if you just know how to extend longer, right? And think long term, right? Like I think like Jenn did not become Jenn in the way she looks now in a one week prep, right? We built that. If you compare our pictures from last year, this year, that took us a year to get there. Like it was a full year, right? And she looks like a different person.
On top of 10 previous.
Yeah, on top of
Yeah.
all the other training, right? So, people, not that anyone ever asked me, but if someone did ask me, Anthony, how did you look like that? I'm like, well, it took 20 years, right? Now, yeah, 10 of those years I was doing stuff that was really stupid and didn't work. But I learned from it, right? So you can look at the last 10 years, it's also 10 years to build what I have now. So this sort of this ties back around, big circle. Think about those long-term goals, right? Don't get discouraged when you don't, when I go out and go, oh, I'm going to train today. Let me pull a max deadlift, and I pull 385, and I think, oh, Jenn pulls more than that. She's half my size, right? Pretty much the sound I make, and then my wife who's deadlifting next to me makes, so she looks at me. Shakes her head in disapproval. All right. So yeah, so consistency it is in terms of diet and long-term change. It is really the biggest thing. I think everyone in this room probably knows that. Looking around, how do you build consistency? And that is a good question. I think, as Trevor said, and as I said, find simple things. Make things happen. Right? It will be hard at first, especially if your habits don't align with the new habit